Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I'm not a biblical scholar by any means, but I've read through the Bible a number of times, the First Testament and the Second Testament. And one of the things that stands out to me is that God made us in His image. Now, I can't think of any place in Scripture where it specifically says that God laughs or God is chuckling with us, but I believe that God does look at some of the things that we do and just has a goes into hysterics about it, laughing at some of the things that we're capable of doing for all the various reasons that we do them. Jesus lived with the disciples, the 12 disciples, and then the other disciples that followed him for 3 years, pretty much nonstop. And you can't convince me during that time that Jesus didn't play pranks on the disciples. If he had a sense of humor, he had to have played pranks on the disciples, and they had to have played pranks on him. One look at everything that we know about the Apostle Peter just screams somebody who is a perfect target for being pranked. If we're imbued with God's characteristics, which includes humor, and that humor is part of our psyche, and playing pranks on each other probably is part of that as well, with that in mind, I'm going to tell the Buttermilk story. If a person's going to talk about stories from their life, probably the first place to start should be their first memory. For me, that first memory was with my Aunt Libby and Uncle Don and involved one of the biggest loves of my life, which is flying, and two people who had just a tremendous impact on my life. Now, to understand this story in its context, there are a couple of things that you need to know about. First is my love for airplanes. I absolutely loved flying even before I knew that people were in those things in the air. As a matter of fact, my Aunt Libby, who is the most God-fearing person I know on the planet, bar none. I mean, she talks to God face to face. But she swore on the Bible that my first word was airplane. It wasn't mama or dada or papa or anything like that. It was airplane. If Aunt Libby said it happened or if it was true, you better believe it was true. The second person was Uncle Don. Now, Uncle Don started out his Navy career as a frogman. And for those who don't know, frogmen were the precursors or the predecessors of the Navy SEALs. Uncle Don eventually ended up becoming a SEAL and going through BUDS, which is the famous SEAL training that everybody else goes through, and he was in class 017. And that was a long, long time ago. Now, Aunt Libby and Uncle Don lived in a modest house on the top of Point Loma, which overlooked the ocean in San Diego. This house is where almost all of my first memories come from. My mom would drop me off at Aunt Libby and Uncle Don's house on her way to work, and I would spend the day there while she was gone. Now, the house itself was very simple. It was just a two-bedroom house, but it had a wonderful backyard that was surrounded by a cinder block wall. Looking at that backyard now, it's a tiny place, but when I was 2, it could have been the entire universe as far as I was concerned. Other than the yard, one of the neatest things about this house was that it was very close to being underneath the departure end of Lindbergh Field, the international airport in San Diego. There were planes flying over all the time. Now, this was the 1960s, which was the golden age of travel in aviation here in the United States. So aircraft were flying over all the time. You had the Boeing 707, you had the Boeing 727. McDonnell Douglas was making aircraft, so the DC-9s were out. You still had the Lockheed Electras, four propeller prop plane flying. All kinds of aircraft were constantly going by the house. Now, going back to, I need to tell you a little bit more about Uncle Don for just a second. Uncle Don is something of a prankster. And I don't know if he was always a prankster, but during the entire time I've known him my whole life, he's been a prankster. And he enjoys playing them. He enjoys watching other people play them. So the stage is set. We've got the house. We've got the aircraft. We've got Aunt Libby and Uncle Don. And then we have 2-year-old me. It's morning. Mom's just dropped me off. And one of the first things that always happened after Mom dropped me off is that we would sit down and have breakfast. I'm sitting at the breakfast table with my back towards the window that you could see the airplanes fly by when they would to take off from Lindbergh Field. Uncle Don is sitting opposite me in uniform, and Aunt Libby is sitting to my left at the head of the table. I was having some kind of cereal. It might have been Cheerios or something else. I don't remember what it was, but I can remember the room and Aunt Libby and Uncle Don just plain as day. As I'm sitting there eating, Uncle Don goes, "Look, there's an airplane." And I immediately turned around to look out the window to see the airplane as it flew by. I didn't see it, so eventually I just went back to having breakfast. Sometime later, I reached forward to get my glass of milk and have a sip, and I did. And immediately I spit it out all over the table. And I remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, this is rotten." And apparently I said it out loud as well. Well, Uncle Don had swapped my milk for his buttermilk. Now, I don't know why any living human being would want to drink buttermilk to begin with. The stuff just tastes awful. But when you're expecting to get regular milk that you've been drinking, and it's suddenly something completely different and just vile and nasty and awful, you can imagine the look a 2-year-old would have on his face, and spitting it out all over the table was just the icing on the cake. Uncle Don just burst out laughing, and you got to understand Uncle Don. He laughs and gets all choked up, and he's just and he's laughing, and his face is turning beet red, and he can't breathe. And Aunt Libby is staring at him like she's going to kill him. And loving God or not, she's going to murder her husband. And I'm just sitting there with this horrible taste in my mouth, and I've got nothing else to drink because there's no water or anything else to drink in front of me. And Uncle Don just he almost passes out from lack of being able to breathe. For decades after this event, Uncle Don would tell this story at virtually every time we got together. It's got to be one of his favorite memories and one of his favorite stories that he likes to just bring on out. And even at his advanced age now, he starts choking up and laughing, and I worry he's going to have a heart attack someday, or he's just going to stop breathing and keel over because he finds it so hysterical. Now, I find it hysterical now too because it's so vivid in my mind that it's like it happened 5 minutes ago. And Aunt Libby will freely admit that she did want to kill him. A side note to this story, over the years, Uncle Don has shared a lot of things with me about being in the teams and all of the things that he did in SEALs, and very, very little of it being the business end of what they did. Most of it was his relationships with his buds on the teams and the things that they did and pranks they played on each other and places they went. He admits that the only person that he's ever been afraid of is in his entire life is Aunt Libby. And he said, she's the only person I've ever been scared of. And having grown up with Aunt Libby, and knowing that she was the ruler of the roost, I don't question that for a second. So there you have it. Coach's first memory was traumatic, and with the people that he trusted and loved the most in his life at that time. Aunt Libby and Uncle Don had a profound impact and continue to have a profound impact on my life. The Buttermilk Story. There you go. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have an awesome day wherever you are and whatever you're doing.